Well, Sean, when we were last here with everybody, we were talking about Brett, and we said, you know what? There could be another one on its tail. And now we have Tropical Depression 4 and Brett, and it could become Cindy.
Yeah, Cindy looks like she is going to come to fruition here later on this afternoon. Of course, we're recording this late in the morning on Thursday, the 11 a.m. Eastern Time advisory from the Hurricane Center. We thought it was going to be upgraded to Cindy, but that will probably happen later on this afternoon.
Yeah. And you were telling me offline here that you had a stat that you read off of Twitter. This is a legit Twitter stat.
Oh,
Sometimes I
yeah.
know, don't believe what you see on the internet, but you can believe this guy, right, Sean?
Phil Klotzbach is one of the people that everybody in our industry respects. I'm just going to read this tweet from earlier this morning. So, Tropical Depression 4 has formed and is forecast to become Tropical Storm Cindy by tomorrow, if not earlier. Now, if that happens, it will become the second storm to form in the deep tropical Atlantic this month. No other June on record has had more than one storm form in the deep tropical Atlantic. And only 4 Junes have had one storm formation south of 25.5 degrees north latitude and east of 60 degrees west, basically south of the Tropic of Cancer and much farther into east. This is
Right.
a testament to how warm the water is
Yeah.
this time of year
Yeah.
compared to normal, for
Yep,
sure.
yep. Water temps are in the mid 80s, which is above average there. And one more thing, too, our typical third named storm usually comes in August. So this is ahead of schedule if Cindy were to form. So let's take a look at our satellite right now. We're looking at our visible satellite. So this is just a direct picture of the Earth here. And we're looking at what's happening with Brett and Cindy, or potentially Cindy. Brett is undergoing some wind shear on the outer western side of it. Wind shear is a change in wind direction with height, kind of rips these storms apart. So Brett is kind of losing its fortifications as it enters the shear area and then getting towards the Lesser Antilles. Cindy, meanwhile, is to the east here, or I should say, Tropical Depression 4. It's more than likely going to become Cindy here. It's a little tiny thing floating around, but there's enough of an organized convection to at least at this time make it a tropical depression. And we'll look at our water vapor right now, Sean. You kind of see the same thing.
Yeah, and if your eyes are kind of drawn to the bottom center part of the screen, and those are the two systems we're talking about. But if you look farther off to the left, you could see a lot of motion in the water vapor imagery there from the bottom left to the top right. And that's where the winds are going through a lot of the atmosphere. So that's why we think the East Coast, the Gulf Coast are effectively protected from any kind of tropical systems right now. The steering winds basically are forcing everything away from the coastline of the United States. That's why we're not too worried about either of these systems for the United States specifically. So let's go and talk about the specifics on Brett. Hit us with that, Joe.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll take a look at what the National Hurricane Center had at 11 a.m. here. So, moving west at 14 miles an hour, it's pretty much going to get very close to Barbados and then St. Lucia as well. St. Lucia did at one point, maybe you can correct me, Sean, here, it was in a hurricane watch for this system here, but tropical storm warnings in effect for a good portion of the Lesser Antilles here. Winds 70 miles an hour at its core, so it's just below hurricane strength. And we look at our future forecast cone here, and we see it pretty much just going due west and going into what we call the tropical graveyard here, which is the Caribbean Sea, where a lot of times these storms just peter out. And you see with that weakening wind as we go into the weekend here, certainly looks to be the case. Now we'll go over to Tropical Depression 4, again, also known as Cindy here, Sean. And so far, path still going to the west and about the same speed as Brett.
Yeah, a little bit north of due west, 15 miles an hour. The maximum wind's 35, so that makes it just below tropical storm status. As alluded to, we do expect to become a tropical storm within the next 24 hours, probably before that, and then take on more of a northwestern course, probably missing the island chain of the Lesser Antilles, and then taking up residence a couple hundred miles to the east of the Bahamas first of next week. But you could see from the graph there, it's not expected to strengthen to a hurricane. The top winds probably no more than 60 miles per hour. This is likely going to be more of an issue for shipping. And as we said earlier, the steering winds, even well into next week, are probably going to keep this thing away from the United States. And I would probably hazard a guess away from the Bahamas as well. As you mentioned, Joe, and take us through the climatology here.
Yeah.
It's early, man.
Yeah, it is early for this. It's not necessarily unprecedented, but to have what's going to more than likely be three named storms by the end of June just doesn't happen that often. I mean, we are very early in the hurricane season. We don't get that big climb up on the climatology until August. We peak around September the 10th. And then it's really just a slow drop until mid October. I mean, really, mid August to mid October, that is prime time for tropical systems here. And we are still well before that as well here. So that's what we have going on. Sean, take us home with a couple of notes and then we'll wrap it on up for this episode of Tropics Time.
Yeah, exactly. So Brett is going into the Caribbean over the next 24 hours and then will ultimately dissipate, but there will be some gusty squalls, some heavy rain through parts of the Lesser Antilles island chain. Cindy's going to continue northwest, or future Cindy, but not threaten the United States coastline at all. Although it may bring a few high swells to the Atlantic Ocean beaches, and this is anywhere from Florida all the way up, possibly even the Jersey Shore your way, Joe, but
Yeah.
nothing that's dangerous. If you just say, well, the ocean's a little bit rough, the swell's a little high, these things do have a tendency to churn up the waters and send those waves farther westward to the coast. So I think those are really the big things. We don't need to worry about these two storms, but as always, it's good to monitor them just to be sure they don't get out of hand. One other thing, Joe, before we wrap, I'll turn it over to you to wrap. A lot of the hurricane forecasts, seasonal forecasts were like, it'll be close to average this year. And just because and we want to emphasize, just because it has gotten busy very quickly does not necessarily mean that the whole season is going to be like this. However, when we go back and look at some of the historical records, a busy early season sometimes does indicate that it is going to be a busier than normal season. It's too early to say that for certain, but I will be very curious to see what happens in the coming, let's say, 3 to 6 weeks if we do go back into a bit of a lull. So
Yeah.
time will tell.
Yeah, we'll have to see if this is a trend or not, essentially,
Mhm.
is what you're saying there, Sean.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
we're gonna wrap it up for this episode here of Tropics Time. We appreciate everybody watching. We're gonna start doing this for this and future hurricane seasons. How often we do this, it's gonna depend on how busy the tropics are. If you watch us during Snow Search during the winter, we kind of did that every Monday. This isn't gonna be like that, a little bit more as needed. But for me, meteorologist Joe Martucci at the Press of Atlantic City, and Sean over at the Richmond Times Dispatch in the Virginia Video Network, we wish you a good Thursday.